Sunnyside has a really interesting history. It was R.J. McNutt and George Howard are the ones who found it. After a rainstorm in Sunnyside Basin, they came over the hill and supposedly the sun was shining on this big vein that was sticking about 20 feet out of the ground, and so they named that the Sunnyside. Turned out to be a tremendous mine.
So generally, the idea in San Juan County was make your money off base metals and make your gravy off, that is to say, make your costs off the base metals and make your gravy out of the precious metals.
The five main metals were gold, silver, lead, zinc, and copper. Sunnyside especially was a big lead, zinc, copper producer. Their ore averaged, I'm going to say, maybe a quarter ounce of gold to the ton and 3 to 5 ounces of silver to the ton. They were mining about 1,000 tons a day. To put it in perspective, that was considered to be one of the largest underground gold mines in the state.
My memories go back to when we first started planning the stopes and being aware of a concern there, and hearing different solutions to it. The main plan was we were going to stop mining roughly 60 feet from below the lake, and so I was aware of that planning, and then I was actually the underground foreman when the lake came in.
Somewhere there, probably in April, water started coming into the 2580 stope on sea level, which was right under Lake Emma. And now there wasn't any mystery about where the water came from. It was obviously Lake Emma water. In fact, they had drilled into Lake Emma to get drill water at some earlier date.
As it turned out, it wasn't the water in the lake that was the big problem. It was the huge glacial basin up there and the hanging wall being carved out by the glacier that brought the water clear down to 60 feet that we thought we had a solid pillar.
When they were mining underneath, they drilled it to see how much pillar they had, and they did a lot of drilling around the edge of the lake. They thought they had 80 foot of pillar, but what they missed was where the glacier had gouged out alongside the vein, and it was just a real small area that it gouged down, and it was just filled with gravels.
The water continued to increase coming into that stope, and until it started to become a real problem. It's coming down the manways, it's coming down, the ladderways, and it's cold, and there's stuff coming out of that crack. It was on the hanging wall fault gouge. Now that was very common in the mine.
This was the 2580 stope up on the letter C level at the top of the mountain. So 3 of us went up there, and there was a fracture in the walls that you could actually climb up into, and we did, and there was a bunch of, we were under the lake, under Lake Emma at the time, and that was a week before it came in.
Leading up to it collapsing, water started coming in a stope on, I think it was sea level. And the miners, they realized something was wrong or something, but they pulled them out of there a week or 2 weeks before it actually caved in.
One date in particular sticks in my head because it was the Wednesday before the cave-in or the flood. The sampler came down that afternoon, and he was white as a sheet. I mean, his eyes were as big as saucers, and he's going like, Bill, you can't believe how much water's coming down. They've shut the stope down.
We didn't have a crew working because it was on a Saturday. But I told him, I said, pull your men out. And there were 6 or 7 of them, and not many. And I was making sure we had them all. We went down the Washington shaft to the bottom, and we had a man trip down there waiting for us because they knew we was one crew that was in there.
Because there was a good 6-8 feet of snow up there, early June. We got a lot more snow back in the 70s than we do now. And then finally we come to Sunday, June 4th. 1978. So I was a bachelor, so of course I went uptown and I was having dinner at the French Bakery, which is now the Teller House. And I saw the sheriff roar out of town, all lights blazing in his blue and white Suburban. Virgil Mason was the sheriff, and this guy was Mr. Cool. He was, I mean, you couldn't ruffle his feathers anyway, anyhow. He was Mr. Cool. And he went screaming out of town, and I thought, wow, that's kind of weird. And so then I went to a Historical Society meeting at 7 o'clock at the library. And so the board was there, and a couple people were late, and finally, I can't remember if it was Alan Nossaman. He lived up near the courthouse near Cement Creek, and he came in and he said, well, they're evacuating people in Bertramsville along Cement Creek because there's a flood and the Lake Emma caved into the mine. And we went, wow, it happened. So we all, jumped in our cars and went up to the courthouse where there's a big parking lot, and that's where the creek comes right along what's now the museums there and there was there's the bridge over Cement Creek. And the water was just within barely a foot of the top of that, that lower beam of that bridge to gauge how much water was there. And the water was pitch black, and it reeked of sulfide smell and diesel fuel. And big 8x8 timbers were floating by. Now, those were the shaft timbers out of the main raise, the Washington shaft. That went up to the upper levels of the mine. And I knew Jerry Hoffer was the chief electrician, and he was there, and he cracked a joke about, gee, we just finished the telephone system and now we'll never get a chance to test it, I mean, but the tension there was, you could walk on the tension. I mean, everybody was just like nervous because they knew that if this had been a day or two the other way, everybody would have been killed. And later stuff I read, there were like, that Saturday, there were 120 people in the mine, working. And so there wasn't anything you could do, stand there and try to break the tension with a joke or two and watch all this stuff floating by and, just roaring full blast. The atmosphere was also added to by the weather conditions. There were thunder, you could hear thunder. There were thunder clouds around, it was very cloudy and it was just kind of a very eerie, with backlit on as the sun set and off the cumulus clouds, and of course then it got dark, and finally around 9 o'clock, Virgil Mason came back, and he had gone to the mine obviously when the first alarm went off, and he was absolutely distraught. I mean, he could hardly talk. He was just jabbering. He says, well, it was like science fiction, like UFOs. The water coming out was like a fire hose. The timbers coming out and shooting out. He was just absolutely and of course this was the guy that was Mr. Cool. Could probably who never got flustered, and he was very flustered. And about that time, Jerry Ott, who was had been the chief engineer, and he took over as manager from Alan Bird. And Jerry showed up. He lived in Durango, and I left. And as I passed him, I said, "Well, there goes your mine," and walked out. And of course, well, there you have it.
Actually, the next morning I went to work down at the drive-in where the bus would pick us up, and everybody there had said that the mine had caved in and stuff. So then they got crews together to go clean up the river and whatever washed down the canyon. When it first caved in, Lee Lopez was, well, he's my father-in-law too, but he was a boss at the time, and I worked with his crew cleaning up the canyon, the creek, the timbers out of the river and everything like that. And then later we went up to the Terry tunnel and mucked that into the shaft. And when we was done with that, then come down and finished up on main level, mucking that. I don't think it's still totally cleaned up, but what we did to get in, we had to shut down in the winter up at the Terry Tunnel. Months-wise, it probably took 6 months to muck into the Terry Tunnel and then a little over a year to go all the way in the main level. When they got it all cleaned up and the rays re-timbered and everything, and then everybody started mining again. They was opening up small places and to get going, and yeah, they got all the mining going as soon as the raise was done.